item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 4351 in the name of Nigel Dawn on Scottish literature on the big screen. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I would ask members who wish to speak in this debate to press their request to speak buttons as soon as possible. And Mr Dawn, if you are ready, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It's recently been announced, well actually possibly a few months ago now, that a film of the classic novel Sunset Song by Lewis Grasset Gibbon is being considered. I understand that Terence Davis is to be the director and that a prospective cast has been assembled. The novel is of course set in the How of the Mearns, in the heart of my constituency, and I started to wonder what impact the making of this film would have on that community and indeed on wider Scotland. Now, we live in an era where it would be unwise not to use authentic settings for such a story, so I can be fairly sure that there will be some location shooting. But beyond that, what? Well, will it be possible to use a Scottish studio, and what about all that post-production? Inquiries suggested that much of the business would go elsewhere, which is both disappointing and, of course, a missed opportunity. Scotland has achieved a great deal in feature film over the 30 years since Bill Forsyth's Local Hero, a movie in which a rich American tries to buy a Scottish beach. Since then, we've had notable successes such as Shallow Grave, Trainspotting, Ratcatcher and The Angel's Share, and these will no doubt be shared by, joined by Sunshine on Leith, which is, as we speak, is in production, starring one of our great talents, Peter Mullen. Our ancient landscape, diverse cities, historic architecture have, of course, attracted filmmakers from Hollywood to Bollywood. Despite intense and increasing competition from our neighbours, Scotland remains a popular location for international filmmakers, as we've seen recently in the shape of World War Z, Cloud Atlas and Under the Skin. And they've come here not just because of our mountains, glens or medieval tenements, but also because we boast excellent crews, world-class talents and extremely professional location services right across the country. And we produce world-class actors, household names like Tilda Swinton, Peter Mullen, Ewan McGregor, James McAvoy, Gary Lewis, Martin Compston, Callum MacDonald, and Gerard Butler, writers such as Paul Lafferty, producers such as Ian Smith, directors such as Lynn Ramsey and David Mackenzie, and composers such as Pat Doyle and Craig Armstrong, of course, to name but a few. And I note one of our Scream Academy Scotland's graduates, Tali Venkelevich, I think, has now been longlisted for an Oscar for the field documentary short subject. Yet despite all these talented individuals and wonderful natural assets, we have yet to reach the level of production, audience and economic impact that other small successful countries in Europe, such as Denmark and Ireland, can point to. In the highly competitive, highly internationalised world of film, we lack some of the crucial levers that we require to attract more films here, retain more of the value they can bring, and grow our own domestic production sector. We need quite simply to see more films getting made in Scotland. Films is a hits-driven business. To have more hits, we need more films. Not all of these need to be big budget, as films like The Magdalene Sisters and Neds have demonstrated. How can we achieve that? Well, we need financial incentives to bring international production to Scotland, because that's what the rest of the world provides. We need investment in infrastructure, and in particular studio facilities that will attract incoming productions and give our local filmmakers scope to produce a wider range of movies. And we need more direct investment in film production to boost the level of ambition in Scotland, including a greater contribution by broadcasters who have a responsibility to work with public and private finance to raise the ambition of our big and small screen production. We need to create more work and more opportunities for people working in film. As I have already noted, our attraction to incoming productions is in no small part based on our world-class crew. But to sustain such a specialised, highly skilled workforce, we need a consistent mix of high-value work, that is network, television drama and domestic film productions. How then can we achieve this? Firstly, we need to encourage talent and skill from an early age, ensuring practical media literacy, encouraging aspiring young filmmakers to develop their talents. But simply, we need to inspire our youngsters. We need investment in specialist skills development in the further and higher education sector, including our National Screen Academy. Put simply, we need to train the next generation. And we need to support business development across the whole film value chain from production to exhibition, ensuring our film-related businesses are able to take advantage of new technologies and revenue models. I suggest that the part that's missing in all that is a world-class studio and facilities village. And we must be clear that this is not going to be successful in isolation. When competing on the international stage, we must ensure we have the necessary financial incentives and that support skills are developed to serve the industry. But we are missing an opportunity, I would suggest. Scotland is a natural film set from sea to mountain. We have the artistic talent and skills. I suggest we ought now to be enhancing the production facilities to ensure that we can build a world-class industry here in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Mark Griffin to be followed by John Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to participate in this afternoon's debate and congratulate Nigel Donn for securing it. I've grown up watching talented Scots flying the flag proudly for Scotland, both in film, television, on the screen, or whether that's been at the other side of the camera. And at the same time, Scotland offers the perfect location for production companies, from its beautiful scenic highlands and lowlands to its bustling cities. Our country's natural beauty has served and continues to serve as the perfect location. The fact that Scotland's film and television industry is so diverse is a testament to the talent of our directors, producers, writers and actors, and acts as a beacon spreading Scotland's story, whether that's through fiction or non-fiction, across the globe. Films like Brave show Scotland's Highlands as a deeply mythical and magical place. Films like Trainspotting, one of my own personal favourites of all time, display the harsh realities of life facing young people in cities like Edinburgh and Glasgow at the height of economic depression. The Angel's Share, which has been mentioned earlier, shows us all the hilarity of the Glasgow Patter. And after all that laughter, we can always look to the Disney classic Greyfriars Bobby if we want one that will just tug gently on the heartstrings. Nigel Donn's motion highlights the upcoming transformation of the classic 1932 Lewis Grassic Gibbon novel Sunset Song into film. It depicts the hardship faced by the working classes 100 years ago. Scheduled to be shot on location here and in Sweden, the film, I've no doubt, will capture the hearts of many. More and more often, Scotland is playing host to directors and producers who see what Scotland has to offer. A certain Mr Bond has made his way back home to Scotland on 4 occasions, and in a number of different guises, most recently in the box office smash Skyfall. And we were all captivated too when just last year Glasgow was transformed into zombie-occupied Philadelphia for a Brad Pitt blockbuster, World War Z, set for release this year. And that's the kind of example of how local authorities can open up the cities as a production set and invite filmmakers into Scotland. Scotland's actors are taking the world by storm too. Mentioned earlier, household names like Gerard Butler, Kelly MacDonald, David Tennant, Robbie Coltrane, James McAvoy, Ewan McGregor, Peter Capaldi, the list goes on and on. They're all A-listers, or they're sure to be A-listers soon enough. And our directors too have been given mention. They've established themselves in the international scene. Lynn Ramsay, Paul McGuigan, Kevin MacDonald, they've already had international success, and I'm sure we'll have more. A great deal of progress is being made within the Scottish film industry, and it's important that it continues to grow and develop. 2012 is the year of Creative Scotland, and it's important that Scottish Government support, where they can, the continued development of our film industry, along with local authority partners such as Glasgow, in the example I've given earlier. So often a country of our size can get tarred with a certain stereotype. There are people in pockets of the world who believe Scotland is full of kilt wearers who have an unhealthy obsession with whisky and a little animal known as a haggis. And sometimes the film industry tends to perpetuate that myth, but it's also been instrumental in showing the talents, the creativity, the skillfulness and beauty that Scotland has to offer. I'd like to close, Presiding Officer, with a quote from one of the directors I'd spoken about earlier, Kevin MacDonald. When he was asked why he had chosen to film in Scotland, his reply was, "Scotland delivered the perfect mix of ancient and modern. Its breathtaking scenery was easy to find and easy to shoot. All-weather crews, modern facilities, epic locations and world-class cities to return to in the evening. Why would I shoot anywhere else? Indeed, Presiding Officer, why would anyone go anywhere else?"
Thank you. Why indeed. Now call on John Mason to be followed by Animal Golding.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you also to Nigel Dawn for raising this subject and securing this debate. I have to say, when I was younger, I guess I thought that all good films were made in America, the duff ones were made in England, and there were virtually none made in Scotland whatsoever. And the thing that changed that for me was going to the cinema, I think in 1994, to see Shallow Grave. And for the first time that I can remember coming out of a cinema having really enjoyed a Scottish film and feeling really proud that we could do something like that ourselves. I suppose it does also say something about my sense of humour, that I found it funny. However, it has been clear for a number of years that while both urban and Highland settings are ideal for films, we lack the post-production studio and soundstage facilities, as referred to in the motion. Clearly, the subject matter of films made in Scotland varies enormously. The motion mentions Brave, and I had not actually realised it was based on Scottish literature. However, it was a really enjoyable film, and follows in a line of many films set in Scotland in recent years. House of Mirth in 2000, starring Gillian Anderson, used Glasgow City Chambers, and one of a number of films which have used Glasgow buildings and the fact that the grid system in the Glasgow streets closely resembles many American cities. More Scottish films that I've certainly enjoyed in recent years have included My Name is Joe in 1998, which featured the Forth and Clyde Canal, if memory serves me correctly, Sweet 16 in Inverclyde, Red Road, using the high flats in Glasgow, and one of my favourites in recent years, Ned's, in 2010, which I felt had a very strong message of a youngster with really no positive adult role models in his life, either at home or in school, who went seriously off the rails. And that's not to mention animated films, of course, like Brave and another recently, The Illusionist, set in Edinburgh and the Highlands. I am, of course, keen that any new facility would be located in Glasgow. Both BBC Scotland and STV are located close together at Pacific Quay on the south bank of the Clyde, and Glasgow City Council deliberately targeted that area for media development with the building of the Squinty Bridge across the river. So it would seem the obvious location if we are going to develop in this area. Of course, as well as specifically Scottish films and Scottish-themed films, we do, of course, have a number of major Hollywood productions using Glasgow as a location. Mark Griffin already mentioned World War Z, or I am instructed World War Z, by my more American-orientated friends, featuring Brad Pitt in George Square and Cochrane Street. And I have to say it was fascinating seeing the city transformed to look like Philadelphia, right down to the actual information boards having Philadelphia maps stuck on them in place of the Glasgow maps. Another recent film shot in Glasgow was The Fast and the Furious 6, which I understand had some 250 crew working through the night in the Brumallow, Cadogan Street and Wellington Street areas. Glasgow Film Office estimates that these 3 weeks of filming on the latter film injected some 20 million into the economy, which is very, very encouraging. I also understand that in 2011 the Glasgow Film Office received over 300 location inquiries, resulting in over 200 productions being shot in the city, slightly under half of which were for TV. I did think that I'd better go to the cinema last night in order to prepare for today's debate, and I did see Skyfall, which I was glad to see did feature Scotland towards the end of the film, although I had to wait and be the very last person in the cinema to see the National Trust for Scotland in the credits, and maybe we would like to be a wee bit higher up in the future. The challenge is to see if we can expand on these benefits and keep more of the work surrounding such films in the local economy. We do not want to be like the country which has its raw materials extracted by multinational companies, and we only receive the crumbs. If I was to disagree with one point in Nigel Dawn's motion, it would be that it is unlikely there will be any long-lasting legacy or benefit just because a film is shot in Scotland. I do actually believe that just filming in Scotland is positive because it does attract tourists and conferences and so on. But otherwise, I'm very happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now call on Annabel Goldie to be followed by Bob Doris.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I too thank Nigel Dawn for securing this debate? Scotland has a wealth of artistic talent, especially when it comes to TV and film production. It was my pleasure to cover some of that territory in the recent members' debate in River City. And Mr Dawn is correct to refer to the importance of that creative presence, because our creative industries employ 60,000 people across more than 9,000 businesses, with some 15,000 people employed in Scotland's screen industries alone. We're currently attracting £20 to £25 million a year of location spend from both production companies shooting film and television productions on location. And the annual production spend on the screen industries in Scotland is £243 million. So all of this is a significant contributor to the economy, and it also benefits tourism. Interestingly, 10% of film tourism accounts for 10% of the total value of tourism to the British economy, and I think it's absolutely vital we should tap into that. The forthcoming film of Sunset Song, the Louis Grassic Gibbon classic, is an exciting prospect for Scotland, and I've noted Mr Dawn's specific concern about there being no long-lasting legacy or benefit from this production, and I think I'm maybe slightly where Mr Mason was in the final part of his contribution, because while it's correct that we should never take anything for granted, I just wonder if Mr Dawn's pessimism is entirely justified. It is a fact that over at least the last 60 years in Scotland, Scotland has starred in and benefited from many film classics shot in various locations and showcasing the beauty of our country. I mean, epics such as Whiskey Galore, The Maggie, Geordie, 39 Steps, Gregory's Girl, Local Hero, they're all sort of written into, film legend, undoubtedly created a positive impression of Scotland, enhancing visitor interest. And more recently, certainly.
Minister Fiona Hislop.
On that point, is she aware that 1 in 5 of our overseas visitors to the UK are inspired to visit by images that they have seen on film and television?
I think that's a very helpful contribution to the debate, and it bears out, I think, what both myself and Mr Mason are saying. Certainly recently, the Harry Potter films, Brave, and the new Bond film Skyfall have all generated widespread interest in Scotland, and there are good examples of Scotland capitalising on that. Visit Scotland has launched a movie map following the release of Brave, which allows visitors to explore the castles, culture and myths of Scotland, where legends come to life, by highlighting the castles, myths and landscapes that inspired Disney Pixar during the making of the film. And Visit Britain is mounting its biggest ever film tourism campaign to cash in on the release of Skyfall. And that Visit Britain initiative is aimed at persuading families to holiday in Scotland who might have been deterred earlier in the year due to major events such as the London Olympics or the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. Visit Scotland is not participating in that £3 million campaign, although scenes were filmed in Glencoe, but Visit Scotland is screening adverts in trailers before Skyfall across the country as part of its Autumn Surprise Yourself campaign. I have to say, Deputy Presiding Officer, I think the one intervention posing a question mark above the enduring attraction of Scotland as a film location is, of course, the ubiquitous presence of wind farms, but thankfully city locations are proving popular. Deputy Presiding Officer, we know that Scotland as a film location can bring a myriad of lasting benefits. It's been happening over years. We know there are strategies to capitalise on that, and it may be that more can be done in the post-production area to cement that legacy. So Nigel Dawn is right to highlight that potential, and we'll certainly look forward to Sunset Song translating into a film classic showcasing the northeast of Scotland and the rest of our country.
Thank you very much. Now call on Bob Doris, after which we'll move to closing speech.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I thank Nigel Dawn for bringing this members' debate to the Chamber today. And can I say that today around 6 feature films a year are produced in Scotland, but Screen Academy Scotland believes it is well below the level required for a stable film industry. At this level, the industry is far more susceptible to dramatic peaks and troughs than in comparable countries with a greater output. The Scottish industry tends to be quite top-heavy, often driven by 1 or 2 blockbusters. In 2006, Scottish films took £7 million throughout the UK at the box office, which was largely in part due to Kevin Macdonald's The Last King of Scotland. However, in 2005, Scottish films only took £400,000 throughout the UK. So this kind of instability discourages investment, and that in itself can lead to greater instability. Creative Scotland has noted that Scotland's facilities for large-scale studio productions are fairly limited compared to similar countries and that they need to be improved. To compound matters, these countries often have more attractive tax incentives for investors, and on that front Ireland has often been cited as an example. And rather than the 5 or 6 films per year on average that we see in Scotland, their average is around 20, despite having a smaller population. Scotland has a globally recognised brand, arguably more distinctive than, say, Denmark, yet its film industry is several times the size of Scotland's. I actually welcome the tax breaks that do exist at a UK level. For instance, films with a core expenditure of more than £20 million, the film production company can claim back significant additional tax relief. Indeed, in the last UK budget, George Osborne announced that this would be extended in April 2013 to high-end UK drama, animation and video games. However, I do see a structural flaw within this because it denies Scotland a specific competitive advantage, and it denies Glasgow a specific advantage that it needs to become a creative centre of excellence. And I'm sure whether we believe in an independent Scotland being able to create these bespoke tax conditions to attract the finest international production companies to Scotland, or whether it's the UK Parliament, we should all agree that it needs to be done for the benefit of Glasgow and for the benefit of Scotland's film industry. And the Scottish Government has sought to target tax support to Glasgow for the promotion of the Scottish film industry by designating Creative Clyde, which encompasses Film City, Glasgow and Pacific Quay, as an enterprise zone for the creative industries. This means businesses based there can claim 100% business tax relief, which represents an estimated injection of £275,000 by the Scottish Government. Scottish enterprise are also keen to attract a purpose-built film studio to Scotland, which can rival the likes of Pinewood in England, and I am sure having enterprise zone status in Glasgow will give us the competitive edge in chasing that investment. And I also know Creative Scotland are keen to contribute to that if they can. So huge opportunities for Glasgow and for Scotland. The Glasgow City Council also, to its credit, clearly are keen to promote film within the city. They founded the Glasgow Film Office for that express purpose of attracting that international investment, and it has been successful. And we've already heard about the investment and the monies and the exposure that World War Z brought to my city. However, I believe that the Scottish Government, Creative Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, the City Council are all focused to delivering in film and production facilities for Glasgow and for Scotland, and I'm sure Glasgow can become a film-making and production hub to rival any in Europe. I would ask the Cabinet Secretary in closing for an assurance that our Scottish Government is helping coordinate these efforts, and I do look forward to a bright future for film production in Glasgow and across Scotland. And, Presiding Officer, I would like to think in years to come that Pacific Quay will be mentioned in the same breath as Pinewood as an excellence in film production.
Thank you very much. Now call on Fiona Histon, the Cabinet Secretary, to wind up.
Okay. Presiding Officer, may I start by congratulating Nigel Dawn on securing this debate. The late Donald Duer's great speech at the opening of this Parliament evoked, I quote, the speak of the Mearns with its soul in the land. And it's also been good to hear Nigel Dawn and others speak of the Mearns and the story of Lewis Grassic Gibbon's Sunset Song. It's a great novel. It truly deserves to have recognition, and as a novel it does have its soul in the land. The great strength of Sunset Song and the Scots Clare trilogy, of which it is the first part, is how a male author centred his work on a fully believable, strong, politically engaged Scottish woman, Chris Guthrie. And watching Vivian Heilbrun's terrific performance in the role in BBC Scotland's earlier television adaptation and then reading the book was a formative experience for me as a teenager, as I'm sure it was for many members, women and men alike, in this Parliament. And it underlines how valuable it can be to read literature from our own country, and I'm confident that our new curriculum will offer an opportunity for more children to benefit from Sunset Song. So I'm thrilled that Sunset Song is being adapted for film, and if it matches the book and the TV programme, it will certainly be a landmark production. that it will be produced by Bob Lass from Glasgow, directed by Terence Davis, and star Peter Mullen and Agnes Dane certainly augurs well. That the work revolves around the terrible human and emotional cost of the First World War makes it all the more timely as we prepare to commemorate the centenary. Now, I'm an enthusiast for film, but we also learn from the last novel in the trilogy, Grey Granite, that Chris Guthrie was not. Let me just quote a sentence telling how Chris and her mother travelled past the site of this Parliament to go to the picture dome that used to stand on Easter Road as they went. Down Royal Mile and up Little James Street to the picture dome, and paid for their seats and went in and sat down. And Chris felt sleepy almost as soon as she sat and yawned. Pictures wearied her nearly to death. The flickering shadows and the awful voices, the daft tales they told, and the dafter news. Now, that might seem a discouraging scene to mention in a debate about film, but in fact I think it's instructive. Because if you read on in the chapter, you discover that Chris's disdain is because the film is a cheap Hollywood melodrama set in a fictionalised New York with nothing to say to her. So just as access to literature about our own country and experiences is vital, so too is access to film production that speaks of the Mearns and the rest of Scotland. And that has great cultural value. And as Nigel Don's motion brings out, it also has economic value, a value that is growing but has the potential to grow more. Film forms part of the creative industries, one of the 7 key growth sectors for Scotland's economy. The film industry has nearly 400 production and related companies in Scotland, generating a turnover of £1.2 billion a year. And I would say to Bob Doris, there are about 15 to 20 features films that are shot in Scotland each year. This includes a range of companies, such as Park Circus, who distribute classic films, Savalas, innovating in sound production, and other companies that find locations, build sets, and design props, to name just a few. And Scotland is becoming a sought-after location for filming, as we've heard. Successes from World War Z, filmed in parts of Glasgow. Sci-fi hit Prometheus had scenes shot across the evocative landscapes of the Isle of Skye. The latest Batman film, The Dark Knight Rises, showcased compelling Highland scenery and delivered a significant benefit. The production spent approximately £1.1 million in the area, re-tarmacked the local airport runway so that a C-130 Hercules could land on it. Location shooting also encourages tourism, as I mentioned in my contribution to intervention earlier on. Visit Scotland calculate almost a quarter of overseas visitors visited a film location while in Scotland. Set jetting, I think it's called in terms of the parlance. And it's remarkable to think that this year will almost certainly have seen the release of the 2 most watched films ever set in Scotland, Disney Pixar's Brave and the James Bond film Skyfall, which I watched last week with my family. The latter was filmed at Glencoe, owned by the National Trust for Scotland, which has just appointed a dedicated locations manager. And I think John Mason has a point about how far up the credits we might want to get our locations to be. The public sector in Scotland is working with industry to support its growth. I think that's the point raised by Bob Doris particularly. Creative Scotland's lottery funding for films sits at £3 million for 2011-12, increasing to £4 million for 13-14. Creative skill set, and points made earlier on in terms of training, is working with the screen sector to invest in our film talent for the future. For example, it's collaborating with BBC Scotland, Beck2, Creative Scotland and Skills Development Scotland on the TV drama training programme with an investment of £800,000 over the next 2 years. And that supports training for producers for high-end TV drama and feature films. So in all of this, the public sector is working with the film sector. For example, earlier this year, a £500,000 commitment from Creative Scotland helped to launch the McKendrick Fund, leveraging in private sector funding to attract investment in films developed by the industry itself with strong Scottish connections. And Nigel Donn signals in his motion the contribution that could be made by to the film industry by having a self-sustaining production centre. Creative Scotland has recently committed £75,000 to work with the industry on a feasibility study into how this can be achieved, with a provisional further funding of £1 million identified if the study shows a way forward. Presiding Officer, you may recall that your predecessor in the chair, at the point in which the Parliament was adjourned in 1707, the Earl of Seafield said, "There's an ain end of an ain old sang." The reconvening of this Parliament marked the beginning of a new song. That has been accompanied by a flowering of our creative arts, including film. We have achieved a lot in film, and I believe with independence and the ability, for example, to develop the kind of film-friendly financial regime that Ireland, despite its current difficulties, has not just protected but extended, we could do even more. So I look forward to seeing the new Sunset Song. It is part of that new song of Scotland and of a Scottish film movement that is not at sunset, but rather heading towards a noontime zenith. Thank you.
Thank you. I now suspend this meeting until 2:30.